Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to explain all of the new systems coming into World of Warcraft for the Shadowlands expansion. One of the biggest critiques of Battle for Azeroth is that there was nothing to do. On release, there were no new systems to play with, only Azerite armor, which was a weak replacement for tier sets. Shadowlands, on the other hand, has done a much better job in giving you more interesting decisions for gearing and setting up your character. I want to give a brief rundown to all the new systems coming to the game so that you can hit the ground running and have a good understanding in order to make the right choices. First, I want to talk about Legendaries. These items have existed in various forms in different WoW expansions, however I'm only going to focus on the ones being used in Shadowlands. Each character can have one Legendary equipped at a time, and although you can't change it mid-combat, you can easily switch which one you're using between bosses in a raid or matches in Arena. Each Legendary grants stats like a normal item, as well as a unique power. These powers can potentially change the way your spells or rotation work, or can simply just boost something you use passively. In order to get Legendary items, you have to craft them. This is the biggest improvement of Legendary items in past versions of the game. There's virtually no randomness with acquiring a Legendary, and you can select exactly the one you want. In order to craft a Legendary, you must first visit the Rune Carver in Torghast. You'll have a short list of things you need as well before you can craft it. First, you need a base white item of appropriate level and slot type. This is created through professions, blacksmiths, jewel crafters, leather workers, or tailors based on the item type. Secondly, you need missives. These are scrolls created by inscriptionists to determine which stats are going to be on the item. This means you can select the exact stats you want on your Legendary to ensure it fits well with your character build. Third, you need the Legendary recipe. These are earned from various sources throughout the game, mostly dungeon and raid bosses, although some are gated behind rep. From the testing I've done, these Legendaries are easy to acquire and have a 100% drop rate. You simply need to kill the boss once and you get it. I'd imagine within the first week of raid release, most players will have nearly all the recipes, so gathering these won't be too tough. Keep in mind that all recipes won't be available right away when you can craft a Legendary. For example, if your best Legendary comes from the raid, you can't get this recipe until week 3. This means you have to decide if you want to craft a filler for a couple weeks or just hold off with no Legendary. Personally, I would recommend just holding off, as the first few weeks of the game are more relaxed with no pressure on performance. It is a bit of a bummer though, having to wait while all your friends are playing with their shiny new toys. Last, you need Soul Ash. Soul Ash is a character-bound resource that cannot be traded and comes from Torghast. If you aren't familiar with Torghast, check out my video in the description explaining briefly how it works. Soul Ash is gated weekly. You can only get so much. To get the max amount, you need to complete the highest layer of both available wings of Torghast each week. This might be a bit of a challenge on weeks 1 and 2, however later on it'll be fairly easy for any character of any spec to clear out Torghast solo or with a party. There's also a possibility that there will be some available through intro quests to Torghast or weekly quests as well. Legendaries can be upgraded, and you can choose to spend your Soul Ash and resources to make your Legendary items stronger up to level 4. This does not change the Legendary power itself, it only increases the stats on the item. This means if you're using a Legendary very often, then you should be upgrading it first right away. However, if you need to use multiple, it isn't a big loss to just craft a few level 1 Legendaries. Because Soul Ash is gated per week, you have an important choice of how to handle your Legendary situation. You can't just play 40 hours a day and get all of the max level Legendaries right away, so you need to decide which ones you want to craft and upgrade at the beginning. For most players, I think the ideal will be to start first with the best raid Legendary and upgrade it straight to level 4. That way, as a guild, you can progress further into the raid, and once you're getting some raid loot, you can start working on Legendaries for PvP or dungeons. However, if raid isn't your thing, go ahead and craft one for your desired game type. One final note on Legendaries, I want to talk about alts. The biggest barrier to playing alt characters right now will be the Legendary system. Since Soul Ash is gated per week, if you suddenly decide to play a new character, you'll have to wait almost a whole month until you can get your max level best in slot Legendary. If you think there are any alts that you might want to play in the future, catch up and maintain them as soon as possible. Get through to level 60 and spend an hour or two each week in Torghast to bank up some Soul Ash. Even if you don't know what Legendary to buy, or even if you'll play that character, you'll thank yourself later if you have a big bank of Soul Ash on all of your alts. Now that we covered legendaries, let's talk about covenants. Covenants contain most of the big Shadowlands specific power, so it's very important to understand them. Throughout the campaign, you are guided through the 4 major zones, and at the end, when you hit level 60, you must choose a covenant to align with to continue your story. This might not seem like a big choice, however, it will be an extremely important one. Once you choose a covenant, if you do happen to choose wrong, you can switch to another covenant one time easily. After you do switch to a covenant once though, it's a pain to switch back that involves a large amount of world quests and time gating. The system is meant for you not to switch often, so do your best to pick right the first time. With each covenant comes many different things. The first and most obvious is your covenant class ability. This ability is specific to your covenant and class and can be a major part in determining which covenant you pick. Once you select your covenant, it's there for good. You'll have the same ability for every spec and content type. Alongside your covenant class ability is your signature ability. This is the same for all members of the covenant and is less impactful and more flavorful. These abilities can still be helpful, however factor in much less to your decision making. It's common that passives that we discuss later can make these better, but for the most part you don't get as much use out of these. Think deeply about the content types and specs that are most important to you when deciding your covenant. If you primarily focus on one game type, you should likely set up specifically for that, as having a suboptimal setup for your off-specs or more casual forms of content doesn't matter as much. I'd imagine most serious guilds are going to expect you to be selecting the best covenant setup for raid progression early on, so that may factor into your decision making. Try to find a covenant setup that works best with what you want to do. For example, with Resto Druid, Night Fae is a strong covenant for PvE content because of Convoke the Spirits. Convoke is a 4-second channel that has immense healing and damage potential every 2 minutes and gives Resto Druids a great way to catch up on healing if they fall behind. If you're mainly playing PvP though, you're going to run into a problem. Since it's a channel, anyone can just kick it immediately as soon as it starts, negating all of its healing and damage. If you care about PvP, you probably shouldn't play Night Fae, and should instead try to make something like Necrolord work. Each covenant also has Renown. This is a rep-like system where you finish daily quests and other various activities to progress through your covenant storyline. With each level of Renown you unlock, you gain different bonuses. Most of them you unlock through Renown aren't that impactful to gameplay, stuff like cosmetics, mounts, titles, and world quest rewards. Renown, like Soul Ash, is weekly gated. This means there's not going to be endless farming of solo content on weeks 1 and 2 to get your tree maxed out. I hope. The difference between Renown and Soul Ash is that Renown has a catch-up mechanic. If you're far behind the cap for Renown later in the season, normal gameplay like dungeons or arenas will reward small amounts of Renown until you catch up. Although I mentioned that most of Renown's bonuses are cosmetic, they have one major tie to character power, so you need to be keeping up with Renown if you want to stay competitive. These are Soulbind trees. Each covenant has 3 Soulbind trees to choose from. When you first select your covenant, only the first row of the tree will be unlocked. To unlock additional levels, you'll need to earn Renown. At varying Renown levels, you'll have access to more nodes in your tree. The tree has 8 different passives to choose from, some of which are built into the tree itself, and others can be selected specific to your class. These class-specific passives are called conduits. Conduits can be found similar to how legendary powers can be, from dungeons, raid bosses, and so on. Conduits can play a big part in how you build your character, so choose wisely. Once a conduit is unlocked, you can place it wherever you want as long as it fits the slot. Each time you change a conduit, you use up 1 conduit energy. You get 1 energy per day, so you can make a few changes each week with no problem, but you can't swap them back and forth repeatedly. There are 3 different types of conduits: potency, endurance, and finesse. Potency are direct upgrades to your abilities, and are almost always the most impactful. Endurance conduits help your survival, and finesse conduits change how certain utility abilities work. Most characters will have 1 or 2 really important potency conduits, and then the rest will come down to preference. If you are playing multiple specs often, you can set up different Soulbind trees for different specs so that you don't have to continuously swap conduits. That covers most of the new player power systems coming into Shadowlands. I hope you are all as excited as I am to jump in and give this all a try when the game goes live. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming out with guides for dungeons, raids, and classes throughout the next couple weeks. Happy keying!